For some of us, alone time is almost a necessity, oftentimes sought out to avoid other people and to find peace. For others, it can be detrimental. For some kids in America, solitary confinement is being used as a punishment in juvenile facilities. Children are locked away from anywhere from 22 minimum to 23 hours a day with no contact from the outside world. In this video, we're going to explore the detrimental psychological effects of solitary confinement on adolescents. Solitary confinement is the practice of isolating an individual and minimizing or completely excluding them from contact with the outside world. And in the video, we're going to be talking about solitary confinement within juvenile facilities, which is going to be solitary confinement for kids. And the effects of this seem to be worse because children are so young. So this lack of time to socially develop and have access to education and stuff is way more important because, they're still developing. Anyways, for children, solitary confinement means no access to education, no human contact, and no mental health care, all of these which are necessary for a child to develop in today's world. According to Colleen Murphy in the Tulane Law Review, this is happening, solitary confinement in juvenile facilities is happening right here in the U.S. and disproportionately to girls who are often isolated as a form of control rather than for safety. In the Turo Law Review, Lauren Edwards points out that many of these kids have special education needs that are completely ignored once they're locked away. This problem is affecting all youths who are placed in solitary confinement, but it disproportionately affects both minors and children with physical and mental disabilities. Children with physical and mental disabilities are far more likely to be placed into solitary confinement because it's easier to deal with them that way, and their mental health needs or physical needs are just not being met. Hafmeister and George in the Ninth Circle of Hell explains that solitary confinement is especially damaging to inmates with mental illness, which many juveniles already suffer from when they enter the system, and it's not at all helped by solitary confinement. Long-term impacts of solitary confinement include trauma, educational and social setbacks, and then in some severe cases, suicide. Solitary confinement is not typically used as a last resort for juveniles that they can no longer control. It's more commonly used as the lazy option. And it's used as this because it's easier than actually addressing a mentally or physically disabled person's needs or a mentally ill person's needs. And it's cheaper to lock the problem children away rather than hiring counselors or putting them into rehabilitation or therapy. While international law and the Eighth Amendment suggest that this is cruel and unusual punishment, courts haven't officially established that yet. In Washington and Lee Law Review, Robert Johnson describes how isolation, even for adults on death row, is often overlooked by the legal system as just a side effect rather than a constitutional issue. While solitary confinement, in the case of juveniles, should be classified as cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment, there are some cases where it seems like it's maybe the only fail-safe option. For example, children who are mentally and physically disabled children, which that doesn't feel necessary, but it's easier for them to deal with. And then also people who are harming others. And solitary confinement is almost necessary to prevent an individual from harming others. But as it exists today, it isn't really about safety. It's more about punishment without accountability from facilities. As the Alabama Law Review puts it, solitary confinement causes dignitary harm, stripping individuals, especially kids, of their humanity, which is so important because children being put into solitary confinement are just missing out on such a big part of their development.
Prisoners are confined in a small cell, alone, for at least 22 hours a day with minimal human contact. Psychological effects of isolation begin to appear after 3 days, and the UN says that more than 15 days is a form of torture. Here in the US, solitary can last for decades.
Okay, as you can see in the video, the effects of solitary confinement are literally being compared to torture, and if anything, this should prove how messed up the system is. And there's better ways to fix behavioral problems rather than just putting kids through this psychological torture.
Younger people are particularly vulnerable to the psychological effects of solitary. Even prisoners who aren't mentally ill are likely to experience some form of mental illness afterwards. Over half the minors who killed themselves in juvenile detention did so while in isolation.
In conclusion, it's clear that solitary confinement in juvenile facilities isn't about discipline. It's a system that enforces psychological torture and prevents children from properly developing. This system needs to be changed because it's causing way more harm than good. Articles such as Locking Up Potential by Lauren Edwards emphasize the harmful effects of solitary confinement, especially in juvenile facilities, and urge for a change. Share this article with other people. Spread awareness because no children should be subject to this. No child should have to grow up in the dark.